Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to my set review of Phyrexia All Blue B1. We're moving into the lands and colorless cards here. Lands are going to be pretty quick, so we're just going to jump right into it. You know, we have the fast lands. These are very nice. Constructed is going to really like having these. We have, so interestingly, the Rakdos one, I mean, that's something for Rakdos mid-range, so I'm not sure that you want to run this over the multitude of options you have for Rakdos mid-range, but it is something that is there, and pushing a deck that is already quite good in Explorer, mostly, but also like other formats. Like you can play, I think you can play Rakdos mid in Standard still. So yeah, that's something. Unfortunate in Limited, because these cards are really not interesting or exciting for limited environment lands. Opening a land from your boosters typically feels pretty bad. First actual like new card here is Mirex. This is a land. It is a sphere, which is a new land type. It has tap, add a colorless. It has tap, add 1 mana of any color, activate only if Mirex entered the battlefield this turn. And it has pay 3, tap it, create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with toxic 1, and this creature can't block. This is probably a pretty solid card, actually. The fixing being only the turn it comes into play is maybe a little awkward, maybe a little dangerous. You know, lead you to keep hands that are not actually functional past the turn where you play this, because you only have one of your colors for that time. But then you do have this mana sink ability, which makes this kind of a solid option to just like sink your mana into if you are color screwed or otherwise unable to play. Unable to make a good play. Terramorphic Expanse is also nice to note in this set, so you have a little bit of fixing. That's important. Next up here we have the Autonomous Furnace, and it looks like, it looks like this is part of a cycle. So these are spheres. They enter the battlefield tapped. They can tap to add 1 of their color, and you can pay 2, 1 and 1 of whatever color they are, sacrifice them, and draw a card. Yeah, decent cards. They feed a lot of value, and you're only expending, like, you have to play a tap land, but you're not overly punished for playing these cards. This activated ability is pretty cheap. We've seen lands like this where the activated ability is less cheap. The green one is very much notable because you can sort of play it with that Crucible card, so that's gonna do some stuff for you. But yeah, it's a cycle, so everyone has one, so that's fine. Next on this list, we have the Monumental Facade. This is a land. It is a sphere. Enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it. Tap, add colorless. Tap, remove an oil counter from it. Put an oil counter on target artifact or creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery. This is nice for the oil aggro decks. I think it's more of a marginal, like a bit player than anything. but it seems solid. Like it seems reasonable um, for any deck that needs some oil counters, right? You put the last oil counter on your creature, or you get it started with oil counters with this thing, and then you proliferate it up. This can also like keep around that the green creature that we saw um, that has a vanishing, fading style ability. Next up, we have the Mycosynth Gardens. This is a sphere, taps to add a colorless, pay 1, tap it, add 1 mana of any color. So, one of these filter lands, pay X and tap it, becomes a copy of target non token artifact you control with mana value X. Well, okay. So the first place my mind went to was copying artifact lands with this, um, because you just pay 0 and tap it and it fixes your colors and stuff. But I guess that's probably pretty bad because your artifact lands are not going crazy or anything. Um, in some ways, it's sort of sacrifice a land, get an artifact of mana value, get your artifact of mana value X. Um, it doesn't keep the ability. It doesn't keep this ability, so it is permanently a copy of whatever it becomes. I know people were like sort of freaking out about this card for, I guess, Amulet Titan in Modern. I can see that, copying a 1 mana artifact. I think you could also like maybe make a case in like in Hammer Time, it's going to give you uh, additional artifacts. You can get an extra Esper Sentinel or Colossus Hammer for your to pure steel up and what have you. That's not nothing. I don't play a ton of Modern, so don't know if that's good or not, if that's really worth doing. It's an interesting card. It's a very interesting card. Next up, we have the Seed Core. This is a sphere that has tap, add a colorless, add 1 mana, tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast Phyrexian creature spells. So anything in this set, we have seen so many like almost everything in this set is a Phyrexian, I think. I would have to see what's not a Phyrexian. I'll probably do that search after this, but yeah, that's really funny. And then Corrupted, tap, target 1/1 creature gets +2/+1 until end of turn. Activate only if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters. This is a callback to Pendelhaven, which was in a land that is green, and you can tap it to give a target 1/1 creature +1/+2. They don't need Corrupted, so you can just do it, but yeah. This is nice. I think people were talking about this in Infect in Constructed. Um, I feel like Infect is more about like being explosive though. So getting corrupted on your opponent but not getting the kill, and again, I don't play a ton of Modern, but I feel like that is something that's not going to happen often enough for this to be a super staple. That said, like just being a rainbow land for that deck is maybe good enough because you get to play Glistener Elf into, Blighted Agent, and maybe you only had another colorless land as your other land or something. Yeah, I think this is probably a solid card. I think the corrupted ability is going to wind up being more flavor text than people think. But, maybe I'm wrong about that. Next up, we have the Surgical Bay. This is the sphere of the common cycle for blue. Yeah, it's just the same. Next up, we have the first of the artifacts. This is Basilica Skullbomb. It is a 1 mana artifact. You can pay 1, sacrifice it, draw a card, or you can pay 2 and a white, sacrifice it. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains flying until end of turn. Draw a card, activate only as a sorcery. It's okay. Draw a card is always nice, so I say it's okay, but, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Next up, we have a Draw Skullbomb. This is a 1 mana artifact. Pay 1, sack it, draw a card. Pay 2 and a black, sack it, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, draw a card, activate only as a sorcery. That's really solid in limited. Most of your creatures are... Most of your bombs are your creatures. Rebuying one of them and drawing a card for 3 mana is decent. I guess it's a 4 mana total investment, but you just slap down the Draw Skullbomb whenever you have a free mana. And your opponent's not going to necessarily spend on it. So solid card in limited. Just rebuy stuff. Next up we have Furnace Skullbomb. Again, 1 mana artifact. Pay 1, sack it, draw a card. This one is pay 1 and a red, sack it, put 2 oil counters on a target artifact or creature you control, draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. Okay, so this one is much less... It's cheaper, and it's much less universally useful. But if you're in the right deck for this one, I think it's gonna pop off for you. Like the red-green aggressive deck, or just, an aggressive deck. I think this is a solid card. I think these are the kind of things where you can just run this to have a deck that is effectively 1 card smaller. Almost. These are almost the kind of cards that you can just run for that first ability, to have a deck that's 1 card smaller. So I think I'm going to revise my statement on the earlier Skullbombs. I think they are very good. They're both very good. Yeah. Next up we have Maze Skullbomb. This is same deal. 1 mana artifact, 1 mana, sack it, draw a card. 2 and a green, sack it. Target creature you control gets +3/+3 and trample until end of turn, draw a card. Okay, very solid. Yeah, these are all very solid. I'm going to jump ahead real quick and hit the last Skullbomb before we go over to Prosthetic Injector. And that is Surgical Skullbomb. 1 mana artifact, 1 mana, sack it, draw a card. 2 and a blue, sack it, return a target creature to its owner's hand, draw a card, activate only as sorcery. So an Ether Spellbomb, but more expensive activated ability. So for that reason, I should say for the reason that these activated abilities are so expensive, they are 2 or 3 mana. These are not constructed playable cards. Unlike the spell bombs. But they are very nice limited cards, very strong limited cards. Because I would happily pay 3 mana for an unsummon that draws me a card. Like, I would do that. No questions asked. So, something that is more flexible than that, more versatile than that, is a good card. Going back now to this Prosthetic Injector. This is a 1 mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +0/+2 and has Toxic 1. Equip for 1. This is a weird card. So it's a toughness boost and toxic. I think this is continuing the theme of the equipment from this set being just bad. And it's really weird that it's a Phyrexian equipment. Because the equipment archetype is like rebels for Mirrodin, yada yada yada, and then this is just like, I'm an equipment for Phyrexians. Don't worry about my arm, guys. It's just just a thing. It's the first equipment with like a reasonable equip cost too. That is just an equipment and does something. Don't worry about this arm, guys. It's an equipment, just like the rest of your guys' stuff. I'm not spreading the Phyrexian dogma or anything, so... Yeah, I mean, I don't like it, because... it's awkward and backwards, and +0/+2, and Toxic 1, and then... Maybe this is for the flying deck, like the aggressive flying deck where you want the corrupted early, and you just want like a little artifact if you can get it. Yeah, okay. I'm still not like super thrilled about it, but it's there. It's something. Next up we have Dune Mover. This is a 2 mana 2/1 artifact creature, Phyrexian Golem. It has Toxic 1, and when Doom Mover enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, shuffle your library, and put that card on top. Okay. It's some fixing. Some slow fixing. This is a decent card. I have no idea why this card, which fetches lands in this set and fetches like basics specifically in this way, does not fetch the new land type for this set, the spheres. I don't really see why we have the spheres if there's nothing that cares about them. Like, this is a perfect place to say basic land or sphere card. But they didn't. Next up we have Monument to Perfection. This is a 2 mana artifact. Pay 3, search your library for a basic sphere or locust land card. So this is the thing that cares about spheres. Put it into your hand, then shuffle. Pay 3. Monument to Perfection becomes a 9/9 Phyrexian construct artifact creature, loses all abilities, and gains Indestructible and Toxic 9. Activate only if there are 9 or more lands with different names among the basic sphere and locust lands you control. This is bad. I mean, it's so slow. Yes, there are a bunch of spheres, but in order to get 9 different named lands that are basics or spheres in this limited environment, you have to be playing 5 color. This activated ability isn't good enough for... Yeah, you have to be playing 5 color for this card to pop and be really good. You have to be able to get your lands back from the graveyard, because what if you have to like desperation sack one of your spheres to draw? So if you're playing 5 color spheres, you have one of every sphere, and then all 5 types of basics, you can get to 10 in this limited environment. So you can pop this. It's possible. Well, actually no. Okay, you can get to more because there's the rare spheres. So you have 3 additional 13. Like, so you have 13 maximum possible spheres, or spheres and basics. So 13 possibilities. But you're probably not getting there unless you're playing 5 color. Right? Because this will, and it's just going to take forever to get there. This card is bad. Right? It's way too slow. The activated ability is too expensive, and then the second activated ability is impossible to pop. People will play it because they're like, "Oh, I want to make make it into a 9/9." It's one of those like aspirational cards. It gives you something to aspire to. That's cool, but it's not likely to happen. So this card is not good. So the sphere type doesn't really matter at all. Now, it may be something that they're continuing into the next set, and that would be... That'd be something to keep in mind for the spheres. The rare spheres do seem quite good, but this does not. Next up, we have Mirror Convert. This is a 2-mana artifact creature, Phyrexia Mirror. It is a 2/1. It has Toxic 1 and tap, pay 2 life, add 1 mana of any color. So it taps for Phyrexian mana. This is a nice little mana dork. He's cute. I don't think he's spectacular. Maybe you can play him aggressively because he is that 2/1 for 2. Yeah, he's alright. He's alright. Next up, we have Prophetic Prism. This is a 2-mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Pay 1, tap it, activate, add 1 mana of any color. Mana fixing. That's nice. Draws a card. That's nice. I think this is probably too slow and not... Well, we didn't see a ton of, like, multicolored... Like, many pips. Not multicolored cards, but many pips. So this seems alright. I'm not super sold on it, but it seems alright. Next up, we have a Soulless Jailer. This is a 2-mana, 0/4 artifact creature, Phyrexian Golem. Permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield. Permanent players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exile. This is weird. This is in the vein of like Grafdigger's Cage and Weathered Runestone. All those cards that are trying to stop the weird, like the quote unquote broken, not broken, but unfair plays. But this is like not asynchronous. What is it? The two clauses are at odds with each other because it stops non-creature spells being cast from graveyards and exile, but it stops permanent cards in graveyards from entering the battlefield. So I guess it stops reanimation, and it stops Snapcaster, Flashback, Torrential Gearhulk effects. It's weird. It's a 0/4, so that is a solid blocker in limited. But its static abilities are doing nothing in limited. Like maybe they shut down the one flashback card. Maybe they stop your opponent's reanimation spell. Unlikely, but possible. But as an 0/4 creature, it's just way more vulnerable than a Grafdigger's Cage or a Weathered Runestone for constructed, so it's not a constructed playable card in my opinion. You might as well play the Weathered Runestone if you really care about that. But neither of those cards is as effective as just getting the cards out of your opponent's graveyard with a card like Unlicensed Hearse. You know, because the only thing. Yeah, or it's pretty much Unlicensed Hearse now, but you know, like a Tormod's Crypt or something like that. Getting the cards out of your opponent's graveyard is just better than locking them away there. Next up, we have Tablet of Completion. This is a 2-mana artifact. Tap, put an oil counter on Tablet of Completion. We have tap, add Colorless, activate only if Tablet of Completion has 2 or more oil counters on it. Pay 1, tap, draw a card, activate only if Tablet of Completion has 5 or more oil counters on it. This is a callback to the cycle of artifacts from Amonkhet that you put bricks on. Much like those artifacts, this is a brick. This does very little. Very slowly. In order to get this to start to pop off, you have gone all the way to turn 7, or you have done an excessive amount of proliferating after putting an oil counter on, after putting a couple of oil counters on this. So this is either a card that does nothing until turn 7, or or a card that you have to sink a lot into to make work, and then your opponent can say, okay, you've gotten your 5th oil counter on there, it's tapped, I'm now going to blow that up. So and unfortunately the other things that put like oil counters on stuff are all more geared toward an aggressive strategy, in my opinion. So this being slow and value-y is not going to play with those cards very well when you could just like be an aggressive deck instead. Next up, we have the Phylgry Silex, aka Ratchet Bomb Plus. This is a 2-mana legendary artifact. Tap, put an oil counter on it. Tap it, sacrifice it, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the number of oil counters on it. Or tap it, remove 10 oil counters from among permanents you control, and sacrifice it. It deals 10 damage to any target. Yeah, so Ratchet Bomb with just an additional ability for some reason. A solid card, a decent card. Why it needed that 3rd ability, why we couldn't just get like Ratchet Bomb or a completely new design for the Phylgry Silex. Like we could have got a new design for the Phylgry Silex, but no, we got Ratchet Bomb again. But just power corrupt for some reason. So yeah, it's just better Ratchet Bomb, so it's good. Sweeper, slow sweeper, but a sweeper. And then like if you really want to, you can turn it into a, hey, I'm just gonna 10 you, if you want to put that amount of effort into it, which you can do. Like you can just like sit there and take it up and then pop it eventually for 10, particularly if you've got other stuff with oil counters on it. That's not unreasonable. Next up, we have Zenith Chronicler. This is a 2-mana, 3/1 Phyrexian Construct artifact creature. Whenever a player casts their first multicolored spell each turn, each other player draws a card. This card is probably not going to cut it in limited. Like, it's a 2 mana 3/1, which is fine for an aggressive deck. I don't think there's a ton of multicolor in this set. Like, there is multicolor. There's definitely multicolor. But it's not like decks are going to be playing 2 or 3 multicolor cards per deck. Right? So this will maybe draw a card. Maybe. Conversely, in, like, Commander or other constructed formats, this is like, in Commander, this is a solid choice if your metagame is very multicolor heavy. A lot of the most powerful cards in the Commander format, though, are monocolor cards. Dockside Extortionist, Jessica's Will, Force of Negation. Not Force of Negation. I mean, Force of Negation is, but, like, Fierce Guardianship is the one I'm thinking of. Fierce Guardianship, Deflecting Swat. A lot of these are from, like, cycles that they just made that were very, very strong. Commander is very likely to, play a multicolor card, but then this is also detracted from because it's drawing more than just you a card. It's drawing everyone except that player who played the multicolor spell a card. It also only triggers once once per player per turn. So if a player casts a multicolor spell, they can go ahead and cast all the multicolor spells they want. You're still only drawing one card. I don't really understand why that limiter was needed to be on there, but it's on there. This could be like a sideboard card against Niv and Elemental style decks, but I think that this is just not good enough. As a sideboard card there, it's only benefiting you, not really stopping them from going off. And if they're casting a bunch of multicolored spells, they are going off. If this was like a taxing effect, that'd be great, but it's not. So yeah, final thoughts on this card. I think it's not good. I think it's not good. In limited, this is going to be a 2 mana 3/1 nothing, no text. And then in constructed, it's text is set up in such a way that you would want to, like, you're only going to want it against certain decks, unless you want to force your opponent to draw cards. If you want to force your opponent to draw cards, this card is great because you can just play all the multicolor spells you want. Other than that, this is unplayable. Yeah. Next up, we have Atraxas Skitterfang. This is a 3 mana 2/2 artifact creature, Phyrexian insect. Enters the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may remove an oil counter from Atraxas Skitterfang. When you do, target creature you control gains your choice of Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, or Lifelink until end of turn. Yeah, nice. Good card. It can jump your other stuff. It can give it all sorts of crazy abilities, whatever you need at the moment. It can, typically you're probably going to spend like the last counter on it, give it like Death Touch or something, Death Touch or flying, and swing it into your opponent and call it a day. It's solid. Next up, we have Ickerplate Golem. This is a 3 mana 2/3 artifact creature, Phyrexian Golem. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it has 1 or more oil counters on it, put an oil counter on it. Very nice. Creatures you control with oil counters on them get +1/+1. Very nice. This is a really nice card, particularly for, like I said, like I've been harping on all of the last couple of colors of previews, an aggressive oil deck. Just, oil them up, and they get pumped by this, and they get more oil counters. Just a very nice card. The 1 mana green creature that enters with an oil counter on it is now a 1 mana 3/3 if this thing's in play. It's very nice. Next up, we have Mirren's Safe House. This is a 3 mana artifact. As long as Mirren's Safe House is on the battlefield, it has all activated abilities of all land cards in all graveyards. I'm going to zoom in on this art real quick. That's some people raising their arms to a large mushroom. Or a large mushroom-shaped thing. Yeah. It looks like something. I'm not going to say what, but it looks like something. Next up, we have Mirror Custodian. Actually, I'm going to real quick just zoom back out if it'll let me. Yeah. Next up, we have Mirror Custodian. This is a 3 mana 2/3 artifact creature mirror. When it enters the battlefield, scry 2, then each opponent may scry 1. Okay. I'm not super happy to play this, but it is playable. Scry, you get more than your opponent does, but it's they get something for free, which is never great. And I realize I didn't talk about the safe house at all. The spheres make it kind of nice because you can sacrifice. It's a mana rock that you can sacrifice to draw a card. That's what that is. Maybe if you have one of your good lands in the bin, it does something beyond that. But really, it's just gonna be a mana rock that you can sacrifice to draw a card in this set, which is fine. But why that's so rare, I don't know. Next up, we have Phyrexia Atlas. This is a 3 mana artifact. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. Corrupted, when a Phyrexia Atlas becomes tapped, each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters loses 1 life. Okay. This is a very marginal effect for an aggressive deck. And it's on a 3 mana rock, so it's not great. Kind of not great. If you're playing a slower, more grindy deck, the corrupted trigger really doesn't matter. And it's more about the 3 mana rock that adds some mana of any color. So, not a great card. It exists. Next up, we have Staff of Completion. This is a 3 mana artifact. Tap, pay 1 life, destroy target permanent you own. Tap, pay 2 life, add 1 mana of any color. Tap, pay 3 life, proliferate. Tap, pay 4 life, draw a card. Pay 5 mana on tap Staff of Completion. Yeah, good card. You pay life, draw cards. For nothing more than the privilege of paying life. 4 life is a lot of life, but whatever, right? If you can draw the card that wins you the game. If you're at 1 life, it doesn't really matter. Interesting in Constructed that you could play this with like Shieldred, and then the tap, pay 4 life, draw card becomes pay 2 life, draw card, which is totally a reasonable rate, right? Because the Shelly will trigger. The first ability is not going to be relevant a lot at all. The second ability means that this is at minimum a mana rock, like a painful mana rock, but a mana rock. Better than that 2-mana mirror we saw earlier in the 3-life proliferate. Yeah, okay, it can slowly kill people because they're gonna have poison counters on them. So I like this card. I don't think it's gonna like blow anyone out of the water, but it's better than it looks. Like a lot of life, but it's better than it looks. Next up, we have Sword of Forge and Frontier. This is a 3-mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from red and from green. It's a sword! Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. You may play an additional land this turn. Yeah, nice little impulse effect. I feel like previous swords, the effects felt more disseparate from one another and more clearly like a red, like a black effect and a white effect, or a blue effect and a green effect. This feels more like the effects are very tied together. Because exile the top 2, you may play an additional land. This feels like it feels like one card. It feels like a cohesive card, where the previous swords have a lot more felt like, oh, you're getting 2 different cards, 2 different effects at the same time. And maybe that's just a statement about how it feels like they've become better at designing more cohesive and interesting cards. But yeah, this is a sword. It's great. It's fantastic. Like, this is never getting picked after pack 1 pick 1, unless you opened 2 swords, or something. Yeah, and then maybe you passed one of them. Maybe you just got up from the table and walked away because, yeah, that's the kind of pack that does that. Next up, you have Mirror Kinsmith. We have Mirror Kinsmith. This is a 4-mana, 3/1 artifact creature, Mirror. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a mirror card, reveal it, and put it in your hand, and then shuffle. We're going to have to look at how many mirror are in this set to see if this is any good at all. He looks sweet. Like, he looks all like gold-plated and porcelain and stuff. Looks really, really cool. He looks like a badass, but he's a 4-mana 3/1, so that's not really killing it for me. We have a couple of mirror that I can see here, but he's really contingent on how many mirror there actually are. Next up, we have Ribskiff. This is a 4-mana, 4/4 artifact vehicle. It has Toxic 2, enters the battlefield, draw a card, and crew 3. This seems like a pretty reasonable card. It is a 4-mana, 4/4 with Toxic 2, and when it enters the battlefield, it draws a card. This seems like, yeah, actually, this seems very solid. Just a good card to include in your deck. If your deck is trying to be a little bit slower and a little bit bigger. Which it could be. Next up, we have Argentum Masticore. This is a 5-mana, 5/5 artifact creature, Phyrexia Masticore. First strike, protection from multicolored. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Argentum Masticore unless you discard a card. When you discard a card this way, destroy target non-land permanent opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to the mana value of the discarded card. That's a lot of text. Why? It's to make it better than just like a Masticore. So a 5-mana, 5/5 first strike, very solid. Protection from multicolored, also decent. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice it unless you discard a card. Well, that ability wouldn't be very great. But then when you discard a card this way, destroy a target non-land permanent opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to the mana value of the discarded card. That's great! That's amazing! Now you can turn your worthless garbage into removal spells. Granted, like if you just wind up discarding a land, I guess you can blow up tokens with a land, which is nice. It's not just less than; it's less than or equal. I think this card is great. You're definitely gonna have some moments if you're playing this card where it really messes you up, though. Because you're gonna have to just decide that it's not worth keeping around. Or you're gonna discard something, and then later on you're gonna really wish you hadn't, right? It's also the kind of card that really, like, your opponent can very heavily punish. Like, you go and discard a card on your... They let it go to your upkeep. You discard a card to keep this around. It doesn't kill anything, and then they destroy this. And you just, like, discarded a card for nothing now. The way this trigger is set up, it's less likely to happen, but you can get punished for this card, so keep it in mind. Play smart with it. Next up, we have the most expensive card in the set, I think. This is Graz, Unstoppable Juggernaut. Legendary artifact creature Juggernaut. It is a 7/5. Well, I would have hoped for a better stat line than that. For an 8 mana legend. Juggernauts you control attack each combat if able. Juggernauts you control can't be blocked by walls. Other creatures you control have base power and toughness 5/3 and are Juggernauts in addition to their other creature types. This is funny. This actually works really nicely with some of the oil cards because they get +1/+1 for each oil counter on them. They don't set their power and toughness to the number of oil counters on them. So they become just enormous with this thing in play. That said, like, it turns everything you control into a Juggernaut. And they can't be blocked by walls, I'm pretty sure is irrelevant text. So I'm going to do some real quick searches here. Just check a couple things for this set. I guess we might as well start with, are there any walls? No. That text is irrelevant. Next up, how many mirror are in the set? 3. This card's not very good. And the last question I had was, how many multicolored cards? And for that one, I'll put the search in now, but, you know, I will... You know, we'll see next time what the multicolored cards actually look like. Because we want to know how effective, if at all, the stupid 2-mana Zenith Chronicler is going to be. Oh, that's not illegal. Syntax. Whatever. So yeah, that is the colorless cards. We have some very good cards here. We have some meme cards here. We have some very not so good cards here. Um, it very much feels like some things, like this Mere Kinsmith, uh, belong in a different set. You know, they don't actually belong here. They were moved here because they're precursors to what is to come. This is something they've been doing a lot recently. You know, sticking hint cards or hint abilities in the current set to tell you about what's in the future, to spoil, not spoil, but tease you about what's in the next set or what is in the next sets. Just like with only two other Mirror in the set other than Mere Kinsmith, it's not the kind of card that is exciting or interesting. Like, yes, you can draft all the Mere Kinsmiths you want and they will go get each other. We have seen cards like that in the past, but normally those cards, it's like you play one, you get 3 or 4, or any number. Well, 3. It's usually 3. So, like Squad Hawk style cards. So yeah, if y'all have any other ideas about how these colorless cards look, obviously, like I said, I am one person, so I can't spot everything. If there are some like cool combos, maybe this Mirror and Safe House has some really cool stuff that it can do that I'm not really paying attention to, then feel free to let me know in the comments. With that, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time with the multicolored cards when I figure out what syntax to use on Scryfall.